Chapter 2. About 15 minutes later, I heard another knock. I'd learned my lesson, and this time I checked the peephole before opening the door. I smiled as I opened the door, letting Devon inside. "Who is it I smell here?" he asked, his shoulder-length hair damp from a recent shower as it fell around his face. "Brandon came by. He was here not 20 minutes ago." The smile fell from his face and concern filled his clear gray eyes. "Are you okay?" "A little shaken, but fine. I was expecting you, and didn't check to see who was at the door before I opened it. If I had known it was him, I wouldn't have opened the door." "How bad was it?" I recounted the whole episode, adding, "You're gonna have to tell your family soon, though. I didn't think about that when I told him you shift. I just wanted him to think twice before deciding you would be an easy target. But he'll take it back to his buddies and word will spread fast." "Babe," he wrapped one arm around me, pulling me into a comforting hug. "I've never been an easy target, even before I shifted. The training I got in the military gives me an edge because most don't expect it, and even those that do rarely know how to counter it." I rubbed my face into the crook of his neck, inhaling the clean, smoky scent of his skin. I felt the slight tug of the shadow of his beard, catching strands of my hair. "That's good to know." I hugged him briefly before pulling away. "Enough about him. I'm not letting him ruin our evening. I can get on board with that." He smiled again. "What do you have in mind?" "Well, dinner's in the oven. It has another half an hour or so, then I thought we'd curl up together on the couch and watch a film." "Do you have a film in mind?" "Nope. I thought I'd let you choose." I motioned toward the screen, indicating that he was free to look through the collection. "Would you like a beer while we wait for dinner?" "That would be great." He made himself at home, picking up the remote and taking a seat on the couch. He pushed a few buttons and pulled up the list of available films, then started scrolling through the list. I went into the kitchen and returned with a pair of drinks. I set one down on the table and opened the other, before handing it to Devon. I picked up the first and twisted its top off as well. I dropped both lids in a small trash can I kept at the end of the couch, before sitting down beside him. I took a long drink and slid a little closer against his side. "Find anything that interests you?" "A little." He continued to flip through the list. "How was your day?" "Not bad. Nothing remarkable, just kept busy." "That's good to hear. How about yours?" "Pretty good. I spent the morning with Alexis. She confirmed what you said about mating and answered a lot of my questions." "That's good." He took a drink of his beer. "Oh, Hank's sister will be here next week, and Alexis said she planned to do something so I can meet her. She said she'd try to schedule it so you could come too." "That's nice of her. I like excuses to spend time with you." He leaned closer and dropped a kiss on my forehead. I laughed. "I know you do." After I left there, I came home and got ready for this evening. "Those enchiladas smell good." "They'll be done soon." "Do you want to wait till after we eat to start the film?" "How about I fix us plates and we eat in here?" "Sounds good to me." I leaned closer to him, grabbing a fistful of his worn t-shirt and pulling him down toward me. "Do you really think that little peck is gonna cut it?" I tilted my head and pressed my lips to his. I opened my mouth, letting his tongue slip inside, to taste me while I did the same to him. I relaxed against him, sinking into his kiss. I released my grip on his shirt, only to smooth my hand over the muscles of his chest and wrap my arm around his waist, tugging him closer to my body. We lost track of time as we leisurely kissed, our hands roaming the upper halves of each other's bodies, film and drinks forgotten. The timer I'd set for dinner pulled us back to our senses. Though it was hard to pull away from him, I picked up my beer and made my way into the kitchen. I dished a couple of servings onto plates, grabbed silverware and napkins, and returned to the living room. I handed Devon a plate, sat my plate on the table beside the sofa, and retrieved my drink, before sitting down on the other end of the sofa. "Why so far away?" I laughed, "Because I know you, if I sit any closer, we won't get to eat." I sent him a knowing smile. He chuckled, acknowledging the truth. "You gonna stay over there all night?" "Maybe." I slipped a bite into my mouth. "That's not gonna be any fun." He gave me a mischievous grin. "Start the film and we'll see what happens after we eat." "Yes, ma'am." He pretended to be chastised as he picked up the remote from the table on his end of the sofa and started the film. We ate in near silence as we watched cargo containers offloaded from ships onto trucks, and a set of street racing cars used to hijack a truck driving down the highway. We watched the story unfold in front of us, pausing it briefly to get more food and fresh drinks. After we'd finished eating and set our empty plates on the coffee table to be carried to the sink later, I slid across the couch. I moved all the way over to Devon's side. Curling my legs to one side, I snuggled up against him. He wrapped one arm around my shoulders, and we sat comfortably together, enjoying the film and each other's company. Later, as the credits rolled up the screen, Devon got up. He flexed some obvious stiffness out of his injured leg while I watched with hungry eyes. He bent and picked up both plates from the table between us. "You don't have to do that." I got up to follow him. "You cooked, it's no big deal for me to pick up after we eat." He took them into the kitchen and rinsed them in the sink before loading them into the dishwasher. Instead of arguing, I started helping. "Your leg's bothering you tonight, isn't it?" I covered the nearly cool pan of enchiladas and put it into the fridge. "Some. It's stiff this evening." "How about we finish here and you let me see if I can help?" "You don't need to do that," he started, but I interrupted. "And you didn't need to clean up." "I want to do it. I'd like to get my hands on you," I teased. "All right, I concede," he smiled. "But I'm gonna need something other than these jeans to wear." "You wearing underwear?" "Yeah. Of course." I grinned, I couldn't stop myself. "Boxers or briefs?" He hesitated a second. "Does it matter?" "Not really, but I had to ask." "Either way, your underwear will do." "If you say so." "I say so. Now finish up here and let's go." I walked out of the room, leaving him with just a few dishes left to load, as I headed for my bedroom. I looked around quickly, making sure I hadn't left any stray panties laying around, and ducked into the bathroom, where I pulled a bottle of baby oil out of the medicine cabinet. "Nickie." Devon called from the doorway, reluctant to enter my bedroom without an invitation. "Come into the bedroom," I called, stepping back into the room. He stepped through the open doorway, looking around. "You have a nice room, though it's not really what I expected." "Let me guess. You expected pink and girly?" He ducked his head, and I saw the edge of a blush creep up his neck. "Yeah, kinda." "Have I ever struck you as the pink and girly kind?" "No, not really. I guess I just thought you kept it hidden." "Oh, trust me, I keep some parts of me hidden, but not like that, and definitely not all soft and pink." He lifted his brows. "Sounds like a challenge." He was intrigued. "Not really, but hang around long enough and you'll find out. Now strip down and stretch out face down on the bed." I smiled at the thought of him nearly naked on my bed. I set the baby oil on the nightstand closest to me and headed for the doorway. "I'll give you a minute of privacy." "You don't have to go," he protested as he reached behind his head and pulled his t-shirt off in one swift move. I stopped, watching the muscles in his abdomen flex as he toed one shoe off and then the other. I didn't let myself move as he unbuttoned his jeans and started sliding them down his long legs. I was afraid that if I moved, I wouldn't be able to resist touching him. And though I was going to touch him anyway, that wouldn't be the right time. His jeans slid down his legs, revealing a snug pair of boxer briefs that hugged all the curves and bumps of his body from waist to mid-thigh. He reached down and slipped off his socks before he crawled onto the bed, working his way up until he could stretch out face down with his hands folded under his head, his face turned to one side. His feet hung off the edge of the bed. I noticed that if he'd moved up far enough to use the pillows or push them aside, he would fit barely. With him settled, I fought to control myself enough that I felt safe I wouldn't just jump him. I grabbed the bottle of baby oil and squirted some into one hand, before setting the bottle on the floor near the foot of the bed. I rubbed my hands together, coating them both with the oil, and started with his feet. I grabbed his left foot and massaged the muscles, digging my thumbs into the stiffest parts of them, loosening the tight sore muscles. I worked my way up his leg until I reached his calf. After working those muscles until they were soft and pliant, I switched legs, starting again with his foot and moving up. When I finished with his right calf, I switched legs again, moving to his left thigh. I dug my fingers deep into the muscles that had been stressed while compensating for the weaker muscles in his right leg. Up until now, I'd worked without saying anything, concentrating on loosening the tight muscles, but as I moved to work the stiff and sore muscles in his injured thigh, I spoke again, hoping to distract him at least a little from what I knew was going to be a painful event. Have you thought about how you're gonna tell your parents you shift now? I started out gently, kneading his thigh carefully, relaxing it some, and finding where the tensest spots were. Some, he said, not opening his eyes. I'd like to tell them about us at the same time. It would be easier if you would go with me, if you don't mind. I don't mind. I dug my fingers deep into the tighter muscles in his leg. I haven't seen your parents in years. I'd like to see them. I'll call Mom, find out when's a good time to go over there. He flinched as I hit a particularly stiff muscle. I'll warn you though, when she finds out, she'll start dreaming of grandkids again, and you'll be part of that. I felt a smile form on my lips. I might not be ready for kids yet, but the thought of a tiny version of Devon made my heart skip a beat. I'm not worried about it. I assured him. I picked up the bottle of baby oil and moved closer to the head of the bed. After pouring a small pool of oil onto his back, I spread it out and started working on the stiff areas of his back. It may only have been his thigh that was injured, but compensating for those weakened muscles put more strain on the rest of his body, leaving overworked muscles that he probably didn't even notice until I started kneading them. Once I finished with his back and both legs, I sat back and admired the long lines of his body spread across my bed, wondering if I was ready to ask him to stay. Before I'd made up my mind, he pushed himself onto his hands and knees and crawled off the side of the bed, careful not to get the oil still coating his skin on the bedding. He pulled on his jeans and slipped his t-shirt over his head before bending down to kiss me. His lips played over mine, teasing and caressing my lips, coaxing my mouth open so he could sweep his tongue inside. I moaned softly, stretching up into the kiss, reluctant to let it end. Then he broke away. I'm gonna go call Mom, he said, picking up his socks and shoes. Thanks for dinner tonight. He bent and kissed me again, lingering a moment. And the massage? No problem. It's a good thing I have to get up in the morning, or I'd be tempted to stay. I gave a non-committal sound, not inviting him to stay, but not telling him I wasn't quite ready for it yet either. I walked him to the door, kissing him again before he left, then closing and locking the door behind him, just in case Brandon decided to come back. A few days later, Devon knocked firmly on the unfamiliar door in front of us, and let his arm drop while he waited. He reached back and took my hand, weaving his fingers with mine. I think he was more nervous than I was. Before I could say anything, the door opened. A beautiful woman in her mid-50s opened the door, a smile splitting her face. She was a couple inches shorter but probably weighed within a few pounds of me. Her blonde hair was carefully cut into a short but attractive style. Devon, I keep telling you, you don't need to knock. She swept us inside, hugging Devon before turning to me. So nice to see you again, Nickie. She hugged me too, and I smelled the sharp tang of her skin that reminded me of rosemary. Devon's told me so much about you. I'm so glad to see you too, Mrs. Wilson. Please call me Amber. Mrs. Wilson makes me think of my mother-in-law, may she rest in peace. If you say so, I smiled in return, extending the platter of cookies I held in one hand. I brought these for you and Mr. Wilson. Oh, you didn't have to. She graciously took the offering. Please come in and sit down. Sean, Devon's father, is in the back lighting the grill, but he'll be in soon. She led the way into the main room of the house. Amber took us to a seating area. Devon sat down on the sofa, pulling me to sit beside him. You said you had something to tell us, dear? She prompted. Can we wait until Dad's here? I'd prefer to only to do this once. Of course, he shouldn't be long. Can I get you something to drink while we wait? You don't have to wait on us, Mom. Just relax, I promise, it's nothing bad. She seemed to soften and become friendlier before my eyes. Amber filled Devon in on what she'd heard from his brother and sister while we waited. A few minutes later, an older man came into the room. I knew this had to be Devon's father. His blonde hair was fading to silver, but his eyes were the same clear gray as the man seated beside me. It was like seeing a glimpse into the future. This is what Devon would look like in 30 years. Dad. Devon stood and moved to meet his father. He greeted him with a one-armed hug. Do you remember Nickie? I used to hang out with her older sister, Payson, in school. He motioned to me. Nickie, you remember my dad, Sean Wilson. I shook his hand. Nice to meet you again, sir. It's been a long time. You're the girl the Aniquitos is so protective of. Sean said. It wasn't a question. That would be me. I smiled, not knowing what else to say. He quickly dismissed me and turned back to Devon. Something's different, your scent has changed. Sit down, Dad. I'll explain, but it's complicated. Sean scowled briefly at Devon for telling him what to do, but did as directed. Devon took a deep breath and let it out in a big burst before he started. I guess this all starts with Nickie. You may not remember her, but I knew her in school. Her sister Payson used to spend some time here, along with the rest of the crowd I hung around with. Nickie Daniels? Amber asked. I nodded. Impossible. Sean put in. That girl was human. She still is. I said. Payson, Rain, Shiloh and I are all adopted at different times from different families, of course. I watched his face as he thought about that. Devon continued. Nickie didn't know about the kindred, or that she was one of us, until she shifted unexpectedly a couple of months ago. We ran into each other while I was moving into my apartment. She already lived in the complex. She didn't know that I'm Kitsune until she caught my scent that day. She invited me up to eat, and we've become good friends since. He paused a moment, squeezing my hand gently where it lay between us on the couch. What does all of this have to do with your scent changing? Sean wanted to know. I'm getting there. I told you, it's complicated. When we met that day, Nickie was still discovering her talents. She'd already learned that she could call animal forms, but she was just starting to learn to control it. We didn't realize until later that she's also able to sense power, energy. It was that talent, along with her ability to call animals, that led to our discovery. You see, she kept insisting that she could feel my wolf, and she thought she could call it. That's not possible. You can't call someone's animal form until after they've shifted the first time. For most, that's true. I put in. We believe that's because most people who can call animal forms can only sense the animal form after that first shift, but it seems with my particular combination of talents, I can sense it before someone has shifted. What are you telling us, son? I'm telling you that thanks to Nickie and our harmonia, I can shift now. Sean was speechless, but Amber let out a high-pitched squeal much like that of a high school girl. When he could speak again, Devon's father wanted to know. Was it really that simple? She could sense your wolf and called it? Simple? I repeated. No, not really. There was actually some kind of defect. Alexis called it almost genetic, and the process to get him to be able to shift took both of us. Neither of us could have done it alone. He nodded again, not really understanding, but taking me at my word. I assume the Anikitos knows? He does, he was there when it happened. Sean stiffened. The Anikitos was there to see our son finally shift, but we weren't. He sounded hurt, though his face showed no emotion. That was my decision, Dad. Not that he be there, but that as few people as possible know. What we were doing was experimental. As far as we know, no one has ever done this before. I didn't want to get your hopes up again, in case it didn't work. Sean seemed to understand, he nodded. I guess I can respect that. When did all this happen? A week ago. I wanted you two to be the first people I told, but between my job and yours, we haven't been able to get together sooner. Is this something you wanted, Devon? Amber seemed suddenly concerned. I thought you'd come to terms with not being able to shift. The Anikitos didn't pressure you into being their guinea pig, did he? Actually, ma'am, I spoke up. That's one of my stipulations. I won't even try to shift anyone who doesn't want it. No pressuring from pack, family, or loved ones is allowed. In fact, Bill didn't even speak to Devon about the whole thing until Devon had made his decision. I saw their eyebrows rise sharply when I used Bill's first name. The Anikitos is Nickie's father's best friend. Nickie's known him all her life and has called him and our Electo both by their given names for years. He doesn't want that to change. And as much as all this is to absorb, there's more. Devon continued. What else could be as wonderful or momentous as your being able to shift? Amber asked, tears of happiness running unchecked down her face. Devon took another deep breath. His hand gripped mine tighter where they sat out of sight on the couch between us, before he exhaled slowly. I knew he was bracing himself for the reaction he knew was coming. Nickie and I are potential mates. He quickly pulled his hand from mine and covered his still extremely sensitive ears as his mother all but screamed her delight. Sean and I both winced at the piercing noise. When she calmed down enough so we could speak again, my ears were ringing. Amber, Amber. Sean tried to get her attention. Give it a rest, you're hurting him. He motioned to where Devon was still holding his ears, in case she started again. I'm sorry, dear. She apologized. It's just so exciting. Don't get too excited, there's no guarantee it'll work out, but we've agreed to see how things go. It's still wonderful news. I'd given up hope that you'd know the wonders of a mated bond. More tears spilled from her eyes and ran down her face. Devon took my hand again, this time he didn't bother to hide it between us. He ran his thumb back and forth over the back of my hand. I knew he was comforting himself, something about telling his parents had him unsettled. I moved my thumb over his skin too, offering both comfort and understanding with the small movement. We stayed for dinner. I enjoyed getting to know his parents again. Once she calmed down, his mom wasn't bad, just easily excitable, and as I spent a little more time with his father, he seemed less abrupt. He cared, but he had a gruff manner. It was different than I was used to, but I could see how much he cared about Devon. By the end of the evening, I knew I would like his parents. I didn't know how they felt about me, but their feelings were less important to me than Devon's.